Hello and welcome. Now, in a previous episode we looked at the MCW and later Optare Metro Rider. We've also recently looked at the Optare Solo as well. And in future videos we'll be looking at other Optare products such as the City Pacer and the Star Rider, and maybe things like the Versa and the Spectra. So I thought it would be a good idea to have a look at the history of Optare and where they came from. And of course this would involve the history of Roe as well, wouldn't it? So step aboard our YouTube time machine and take a seat as we journey back to have a look at the history of Charles H Roe and Optare. The story of Optare really starts way back in 1917 in Leeds in Yorkshire. But before I begin, just a reminder that this is a potted history of a company that's had many years of work and many years of production. And I may have left things out or just omitted them for the sake of time. And if it's something that is important to you, then please comment down below and let me know. And I do apologise if it is something that's genuinely important. And this is when Charles Henry Roe, who was a coach builder, a draftsman, an engineer, and more importantly, an entrepreneur, established a coachworks business which bared his name. In fact, Charles Roe continued to be a director of the company right up until 1952. The company produced very durable and solid bodywork, which was fitted to a variety of bus, trolleybuses and coaches. In fact, the company even bodied a few cars, railway carriages, tram and commercial vehicles as well. Now, I am planning on doing a series of videos about the various coach builders that are around the country or were around the country. And as of September 2025, the news is all about the import of cheap Chinese buses that's affecting the coach builders in the UK, such as Wright and ADL. So I think this would be a good opportunity to take a look at our history that we have with building these fine vehicles. Everybody has their own favourite coach builder, don't they, in bodywork? A bit like everybody has their own favourite chassis and type of bus. Anyway, back to the Optare story. Unfortunately, the original company ended up being wound up in 1922 as a result of the 1920s recession and simply just not having enough orders and therefore enough income. However, Mr. Roe was to bounce back, starting yet another company, this one called Charles H Roe 1923 Limited. And many of their early products were trolleybus bodies on carrier chassis. Again, in those early years, they built some rather strange vehicles, including in 1924 a 36-seat petrol rail vehicle for the Derwent Valley Light Railway. And this was based on two Ford Model T chassis fitted with flanged steel wheels and coupled back to back. Now, just listening to that, I am getting serious scrap heap challenge vibes running through my mind. I don't know about you, but it sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it? By 1925, Roe were receiving orders for bodywork directly from municipal bus companies. Roe achieved a reputation of approachability during body construction, and they would quite happily allow general managers of companies to come to the factory and inspect the bodywork in mid-build, this proving to be very popular with them. The first bodywork that Roe built on double-decker motor buses were for Doncaster in 1925, and these were on AEC chassis. During the lifetime of the company, there were many patents for various designs. One of these would be in 1930, when Grimsby Corporation placed an order for a centre entrance double-decker. And this would feature a distinctive design of staircase which rose transversely 2 steps to a wide landing, then branched into a forward and rearward ascending longitudinal flights to the upper deck. In 1934, the name was changed to just Charles H Roe, and the 1923 was omitted, this being 5 years since the original company was wound up. 1935 would see another innovative design coming out of Crossgates, this being the safety staircase, which was also patented by the company. This staircase would be fitted onto the rear platform of a bus and gave less loss of seating capacity than the straight staircases, which were favoured in London and Birmingham at that time. But this particular staircase intruded less onto the boarding platform than the normal semi-spiral arrangement, whilst being superior to either layout in having two broad landings, which allowed boarding and alighting passengers to pass on the staircase. This became a standard feature of all subsequent peacetime Roe double-deck bodies for Leeds Corporation and was widely employed in other fleets, with 777 examples being built by Roe prior to the expiry of the patent in 1950. During the Second World War, Roe continued to build mainly passenger bodies, although they did build other specialist things such as some bodies for communication trucks and mobile printing presses on Foden lorries, and articulated mobile kitchens, canteens and dormitories. During this period, they would turn out 240 single-decker utility bodywork on Bedford OWB chassis and 400 double-deck bodies on Guy and Daimler motorbuses, as well as Sunbeam trolleybuses, most of these being to the low-bridge layout. In 1945, the share capital increased to £108,000, and the works at Crossgates was increased in value to £98,000. That, in 1945, is an astronomical amount of money. Prior to the war, though, English Electric Company and Metro Camel Wayman had approached Roe about an amalgamation or takeover, and in 1945 talks were opened with Mumford of Lydney in Gloucestershire. All of these talks were inconclusive, but in 1947 Park Royal Vehicles brought a controlling shareholding in the company. With the takeover, 3 Roe board members were replaced by Park Royal directors, and Charles H Roe himself joined the board of Park Royal. However, things would change again in 1949 when Park Royal were taken over by Associated Commercial Vehicles, which by then was the parent company of not only AEC but also Crosley and Maudsley. During the early 1950s, there was some rationalisation between the Park Royal and the Roe bodywork. This would see any orders for Park Royal composite bodies being transferred to Roe, and steel frame bodies which were either built for Park Royal or by Roe using Park Royal frames. By the mid-1950s, all metal frame bodies built by the ACV subsidiaries, regardless of coach builder, had a Park Royal outline. During this time there was one bodywork that stood out, and it was the only one that would be named by Roe, and this would be the Pullman bodywork. Now, when this was first shown way back in 1937, it was considered ultra-modern as it had 4 window bays instead of the usual 5. It was a composite body that was built exclusively on the AEC Regent 3. Now, for those of you wondering, a composite body is something that consists of both wooden and metal supporting framework. The original Roe bodywork had a patent waist rail, which was a teak structural member. However, the teak structural member was eventually covered by roll-steeled plate. However, by 1957, the composite double-decker bus reached its final form with teak framing in the lower deck ceiling and upper deck floor and an aluminium framework above. In fact, this was to continue right up until 1968 with some Daimler CVG6s for Northampton Corporation. However, the British Electric Traction Group, the PET Group, which was a group of major regional bus operators around the country, and owned companies such as East Kent, Southdown, Devon General, Ribble, to name a few, wanted a standard steel-framed bodywork with a very angular outline, and this first appeared as the production version of the integral AEC Bridgemaster. And this style of bodywork soon spread to all other steel-framed Park Royal and Roe double-decker bodywork. This style went to a range of operators. Trent, Devon General, Northern General took this style of bodywork on Leyland Atlanteans. Swindon Corporation taking Daimler CVG6s, and both Yorkshire Traction and Stratford Blue Motors taking rebodied Leyland Tigers, all with this style of bodywork. It's also worth mentioning at this point that Roe bodied 131 of the 137 Guy Wolfrunians built between 1959 and 1965. The Guy Wolfrunian being a rather strange front-engined bus that tried to do too much too soon, and to be fair was a little bit of a flop. I don't think I've done a video on the Guy Wolfrunian yet. Is that something you'd like to see? The history of the Wolfrunian? I know I mentioned it when I was talking about the Volvo Ailsa, but I don't think I've actually done a separate video on it. Let me know if that is something that floats your boat. 1962 would see ACV merged with Leyland Motors to form the Leyland Motor Corporation. And in 1965, Leyland Motor Corporation sold a 30% shareholding in Park Royal Vehicles and Charles H Roe to the state-owned Transport Holding Company in return for a 25% stake in Bristol Commercial Vehicles and Eastern Coachworks. And some would say that this is where everything started to fall apart and go rather wrong. That same year, 1962, Charles H Roe retired as company chairman and sadly died in 1965. Now, I did a video some time ago about how people were very dissatisfied with those very early box-like Leyland Atlantean bodywork, and how Alexander managed to style it with the help of fiberglass and some curved windows. I'll try to remember to put a little link up in the top right hand corner if I can. Indeed, one of these operators would be Sunderland Corporation, who took a heavily revised version of the bodywork on Daimler fleet lines between 1962 and 1966, and these would feature a prominent peak at the front dome. Another variation would be Great Yarmouth Corporation, who would specify double curvature windscreens of Alexander design on its Leyland Atlanteans. And to some extent this would become a standard option at Roe, who would also fit the Alexander style double curvature upper deck front window on rear engine chassis. 1964 would see Leeds take a batch of fleet lines to this Great Yarmouth design. However, Leeds would keep revising this design over the next few years, and in 1966 it was extended to 33 foot long rather than the previous 30 foot 10 inches. Double curvature windscreens would feature on both the upper deck and the lower deck, and side glazing became panoramic. 1968 would see the introduction of angled flat glass at the front and a glass fibre dash added, as well as a centre exit. The rear upper deck dome would revert to a squarer outline, and this would see the birth of the standard Roe bodywork. This standard design would go on to be adopted by West Yorkshire PTE on the AN68 Atlantean and became the National Bus Company's second choice double-decker, being associated with companies such as Ribble Motor Services, Northern General and Southdown Motor Services. And it also became the standard double-decker with London Country, who took over 300 of them. By 1982, Leyland Vehicles, the truck and bus division of the now state-owned British Leyland, bought out the National Bus Company's 50% shareholding in the joint venture Bus Manufacturers Holding Limited. This owned the companies of Bristol, Eastern Coachworks, Park Royal, Roe, and also the Leyland National Factory at Workington in Cumbria. Around this time, some strange vehicles left the Crossgates factory, and these would be 18-metre long articulated buses for British Airways, which would employ Leyland National body sections on Leyland DAB underfloor engine chassis. The standard bodywork was phased out in 1981 as the fleet line had been discontinued and the Atlantean was being wound down. 81 would also be the year that Park Royal would close. The new body, which replaced the standard double-decker body, was based on that of the Leyland Titan and would be fitted to the Leyland Olympian chassis, and Roe would produce 299 of these bodies on Leyland Olympians prior to their closure. Most went to West Yorkshire, National Bus Company subsidiaries of Bristol Omnibus Company and London Country. However, Strathclyde Passenger Transport Executive also took one batch, and a sole vehicle went to the Scottish Art Council, where it was turned into a travelling arts gallery. Now, at this same time, Leyland were introducing the Leyland Royal Tiger, and Roe were involved with building the bodywork on these vehicles. Now, if you'd like to see a video on this, again, please comment down below, because this was meant to be a British alternative to the high-end Setra coach from Germany. However, by 1983, production of the underframe for the Leyland Royal Tiger was moved to Workington in Cumbria, and 22 coaches were completed by Roe, as well as 86 Olympians that year. The plant was not at that point viable for British Leyland to keep, and on the 17th of September 1984, Charles H Roe closed. Now, that should be the end, but it's not, fortunately. The former workers and management of the company pulled their redundancy money, and in February 1985 returned to the Roe factory in Crossgates with a new bus building business under the new name of Optare. Optare being based on the Latin for choice or to choose. The figurehead of this was a guy called Russell Richardson, who had been the former plant director at Roe. He was backed by the West Yorkshire Enterprise Board, as well as many redundant former employees. The company was formed in February 1985. When Charles H Roe closed down, West Yorkshire PTE had had an unfulfilled order for 5 Leyland Olympian coach-seated double-decker buses. These part-finished buses were sent from Roe to Eastern Coachworks as shells for completion, but subsequently 10 more were completed as Optare buses, but to the Roe design, the first of which was completed in September 1985, which was the 17th Optare bus body. 5 of these would go to West Yorkshire PTE and 5 would go to its successor, Yorkshire Rider, and yet a further 5 standard seating Olympians were also delivered to West Yorkshire PTE, 2 of which were convertible open-top buses. Other bodywork of this type would find its way into the fleet of Maidstone Borough Line and also Reading. The first true designed Optare bodywork were 14 Dennis Dominoes for South Yorkshire PTE, built in February 1986. Optare also bodied 15 Leyland Cubs for the West Yorkshire PTE, and in the latter end of August 1986, Optare built 15 minibuses converted from the Freight Rover Sherpa 350 vans for West Yorkshire PTE. In 1985, Optare launched the City Pacer, and this was really a taste of what Optare would become. They would take chassis that were, to be fair, lesser known in the UK and make them with their bodywork, which would become a complete product which then they would sell. The basis of this City Pacer was the Volkswagen LT55 chassis, and I will be doing a video on this in the future. The Optare City Pacer, not the Volkswagen LT55, of course. In a world at that time when minibuses were consistently using the front cowl of the manufacturer of the minibus, such as Full Transits or the Freight Rovers, this was a step away from that, and it looked a totally striking and different vehicle to any other minibus on the road at the time. In 1987, Optare launched the Star Rider, which was a minibus and mini coach, although to be fair, it was more around the midi bus and midi coach area, wasn't it, with the size of it. Underneath the Optare bodywork was the Mercedes-Benz 811D chassis, which again was a van chassis. Both of these would compete initially with the MCW Metro Rider, which was launched in 1986. The Metro Rider being an integrally built vehicle which was designed as a small midibus from the ground upwards, so it didn't utilise a van chassis, and I have done a video on the Optare Metro Rider, well, the MCW and Optare Metro Rider, and I'm trying to remember to put a little link up in the top right hand corner for that video. However, as we all know, MCW went belly up and the Metro Rider design passed to Optare, and this would ultimately replace both the Optare City Pacer and the Optare Star Rider. Just slightly before this, in 1990, Optare bodied 13 Renault S50 minibuses with a welfare bodywork, these being for Leeds City Council. But wait a minute, I'm galloping ahead here. Following on from the launch of the Star Rider, 1988 would see the first full-size Optare vehicle appear, and this would be the Delta. This would be a single-deck bus based on the DAF SB220 chassis. Now, in this direct post-bus deregulation landscape, things were a little bit shaky when it came to buying and ordering new vehicles. But the Delta found a niche in the full-size single-decker bus market, and 370 Deltas were built before production ended in 1998. A bit like the City Pacer and indeed the Star Rider, the Delta would feature a large, broad, flat windscreen and a style that would become unmistakably that of Optare. Now, around this time, Dennis had created the phenomenon that went on to become the Dennis Dart. And if ever there was a bus that was in the right place at the right time, it would be the Dart, wouldn't it? In the same way that the Bristol low-decker spawned lots of low-height double-decker buses in the 1960s, such as the AEC Bridgemaster, the AEC Renown, and the Leyland Lowlander, the Dart would have a few competitors and copycats as well, these being the Volvo B6 and the Optare Vector, which was built to directly compete with the market that the Dart was going for at that time. The basis for the Optare Vector was the MAN 11.190, and this featured a ZF gearbox and full air suspension. Again, the bodywork had that Optare look, and it could be argued it was a scaled-down version of the Delta. November 1989 would see the formation of United Bus, which was a European bus and coach manufacturing group, which was created by the merger of Dutch manufacturers DAF and Bova. In May 1990, Optare was bought out by United Bus for around $5 million. With Optare already using the DAF chassis, the SB220 on the Delta, now part of United Bus, as I mentioned, Optare worked with DAF to design the Optare Spectra, which was their first off-the-drawing-board double-decker bus. Now, when MCW had gone belly up, as I mentioned previously, not only had they bought the design for the MCW Metro Rider minibus, they also bought the design for the MCW Metro bus, as well as, interestingly, the design for the MCW Metro Liner coach. Whilst the Metro Rider had gone straight into production pretty much as the MCW product, with a few little tweaks here and there of course, the MCW Metro bus design was stripped right back, and it combined parts from the Metro bus and the DAF SB 220. This would form a new double-deck chassis which would become the DB 250, and when it was fitted with Optare bodywork it was called the Spectra. Now, due to the United Bus relationship and the joint design, the Spectra was built exclusively on the DB 250 chassis. Again, the design featured that unmistakable Optare look that was starting to creep into the whole range now. And this would be one of the first, if not the first, of the new bus designs that would feature no rear window. The Spectra would be introduced in 1990. In the early 1990s, the recession hit United Bus rather hard. So much so that in 1993 the group filed for bankruptcy. Fortunately though, Optare returned to independent status with yet another management buyout. In a roundabout way, this would be quite a positive thing because it would allow the Delta bodywork to appear on different single-decker chassis, these being vehicles like the Sigma and the Purisma. The Purisma, of course, being based on the Mercedes-Benz 0405 chassis, and this featured a Mercedes-Benz front end rather than the Optare style front end that we were starting to get all used to. 1996 would see Optare acquire Autobus Classique. Now, I hope I pronounced that right. My record of pronunciation on this channel isn't particularly good, especially French and Welsh, and I think that's French, so let me know if I've pronounced it wrong. They produced a luxury mini coach, and Optare significantly redesigned and rebadged it in 1997 as the Nouvelle 2. Around this time as well, Optare started to import the Solera luxury midi coach into the UK. 1995 would see the first low-floor product come from Optare, and this would be the XL, this being available with Cummins and Mercedes-Benz engines, and also Allison transmission. 1997 would see the DB250 chassis on the Spectra reworked to become a low floor. This would become the DB250 LF. This would allow the Spectra to take the crown to be the first fully low-floor double-decker bus on offer in the UK. That same year would see the launch of the Solo. Now, I've done a video on the Solo, and I will try to put a link up to that video in the top right-hand corner for you to watch at your leisure. The year 2000 would see Optare being bought by North American Bus Industries, who of course were owned by the Hungarians. Who else? And this in theory would give Optare products exposure to the North American market. And indeed the Solo was actually marketed in the US and did have a very limited success over there. By August 2005 though, North American Bus Industries found itself in financial difficulties, and once again the management from Optare acquired the business. Now it has to be said at this point that Optare must have been on first name terms with their business banking manager, mustn't they? This era would also see the rollout of the Versa and the Solo SR. March the 12th, 2008, Optare was purchased by Jamestown Investments, an investment company controlled by the Darwin Group's parent company chairman, Ron Stanley. Now, initially, Optare remained an independent company, but from July 2008, a reverse takeover by the Darwin Group had been completed. It's all very confusing, isn't it? This would see Optare floated on the stock exchange as Optare plc. And at that time, the company was employing 830 people with a £90 million turnover. The Darwin takeover would also bring East Lancashire coach builders into the equation, East Lancs having been founded in Blackburn, Lancashire in 1934. This would see the former East Lancs products of the Olympus bodywork and the Esteem bodywork marketed as Optare products. And at this point, Optare were manufacturing vehicles from 3 sites, the main site being Crossgates in Leeds, the former Charles Roe factory, Blackburn, which was the former East Lancs factory, and a further facility in Rotherham. In the summer of 2010, H Leyland, which was the former Indian subsidiary of British Leyland, bought a 26% stake in Optare. This stake was subsequently increased to 75%, and once again, Optare had passed into Leyland ownership. Now I say once again because last time it was Charles Roe, but you know what I mean. Also in 2011, a new fully enclosed 13,000 square metre factory opened in Sherburn in Elmet, which replaced the former Roe factory in Leeds. The following year, the former East Lancs site also closed, putting all the manufacturing processes under one roof. 2017, H Leyland increased its shareholding in Optare to 98%, and the following year this increased to 99%. Now there's always going to be one pesky shareholder who holds out, isn't there? November 2020 would see Optare being rebranded as Switch Mobility. 2021 would see Switch Mobility Limited announcing plans to roll out its electric buses and light commercial vehicles from the group's UK and Indian plants. However, in December 2021, Switch Mobility Limited announced the setting up of a manufacturing and technology centre in Spain. And you can see where this is going, can't you? Yes, it's sad, isn't it? In March 2025, it was announced that a consultation process had begun for the closure of the Sherburn in Elmet factory, which, after all those units in Spain being built, we kind of could see that happening, couldn't we? Although Switch blamed the slow uptake on electric vehicles by public transport operators. Well, would you believe it? We've reached the end of this video, and it's been a long one, hasn't it? It's been an uphill struggle sometimes. And I really hope you enjoyed this history on building buses in Leeds with the transition from Roe to Optare. If you did enjoy this video, please like, hype, and share it. Hyping is the new thing. It's like a super like sort of thing. And it helps us all get noticed by YouTube, doesn't it? Which is a good thing. If you like what I do and you enjoy this video and you enjoy the videos on the channel and you actually are a big fan of the channel, you can buy me a drink if you like. If you feel that way inclined, I'd be very grateful. If you hit the super thanks button, it will give you all the details there. Thank you so much for watching. Now, we've had a few new faces join the channel in the last few months, and I'd like to welcome you all here. We're a friendly bunch, if a little loony at times, but that's not a bad thing either. If you're new to the channel, drop a message down below to say hello. It's always great to chat to people, or like-minded people, and bus enthusiasts and everything like that. And you can share your memories of Roe, and you can share your memories of Optare down below. I do like reading your memories and your thoughts and the extra information that you provide, and I do try and reply to each and every one of you. I normally release videos on a Saturday morning. I release a short on a Monday night, and I release another full-length video on a Wednesday night, the majority of which will be bus related. Again, if you've not been here before, check out my back catalogue. It's nothing rude. You look like a bus enthusiast of good taste, so there's going to be something there for you. Right, I'm going to go for a lie down in a dark room. Once again, thank you ever so much for watching. Bye for now.